Hey everyone, welcome again to How to Think. I'm also representing the Creation Summit today. I have a great interview for you here. I've got Brian Lauer. Now he goes and he speaks to different college campuses and schools all across the country. He has a site, Solidify Your Faith. He's going to be telling us about a flood model today, hydroplate tectonics among some other things. And so we're very glad to have you here. Welcome, Brian.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Kurt, and I appreciate what you're doing to get the information out there.
Amen. I think that's very important. For me personally, I was an atheist, and so part of why I was an atheist is the information that's out there simply isn't out there. You really have to go and seek it out from sources like yourself. So appreciate what you're doing. But yeah, you don't get it at school. You're not going to get it at college. You're not going to get any of these alternate concepts or ideas, and so you're just left in the dark unless you know to look it up. So just tell us a bit about that and yourself.
Well, yeah, basically, I never saw the creation model till I was almost 40 years old. I never seen that fossils were a sign of a flood and that evolution was based on lies. And that just happened because my cousin sent me a copy of this video called The Age of the Earth by Kent Hovind. And it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
man, they didn't teach me that in school. And my wife and I, we said, well, what else didn't they teach? So then we got his DVD seminar, which was 17 hours long and 7 DVDs. And we just had Hovind night with our kids, make popcorn. It's like, boy, and we learned. And so that was a tremendous blessing. And it is, and so then I just started learning more and more and more. And here I am. And it's a lot of fun. It really is. It's the battle. I look at the world as it's a mess because there's a battle between God's truth and Satan's lies. And I think ground zero for that battle is creation versus evolution. And I think if we can win that battle, then I think that a lot of those other issues will go away. The challenge we have is that the textbooks that we're funding with our taxes has false information in it that props up the blind chance theory. And so I think if Christians and taxpayers realize what errors are in the textbooks, that I think we could change that if we unite on that. And so, yeah, it bothered me that they just taught a blind chance perspective of the past in school. That's and I don't call them big bangers and evolutionists. They're both based on blind chance, so I call them blind chancers. And it's like thinking the building you're in got put together by chance. That'd be pretty absurd. How much more absurd to think that our bodies got put together by chance. But if that's all people see, they just memorize, they don't think. And so my passion is to give people another perspective so they can see both sides and then they can think. And that's pretty much what I'm all about. And I just go wherever God opens the doors, and it's a tremendous adventure. It really is. And it's got eternal consequences. So I encourage people to get informed and inform others.
Yeah. And yeah, that hits close to home. And part of it's also, he who answereth a matter before he heareth it out, to him it is folly and shame unto him. And that's exactly what we're doing. We don't hear the other side of it, and we're already answering it. And it's funny you mentioned Ken Hovind, because that was kind of my introduction to
Oh yeah,
creation science and stuff as well. I even interviewed him on this channel.
sure,
So yeah.
sure. Yeah, he has a small army out there, and I think that helped us have freedom 5 years ago. People were a little skeptical of the government, and rightfully so. And wherever I go, it seems like his name comes up. So he's
Yeah.
planted a lot of seeds around the country.
Now, so I think one of the things you specialize in is a different flood theory. And so it's maybe a good place to kind of start would be, so obviously there's the probably most common view in the world of that there was no flood, there was no global flood, right? Then probably the popular creationist theory is the catastrophic plate tectonics. But then the one that I think you have studied and searched more is the hydroplate tectonics or
Yeah,
hydroplate theory.
the hydroplate theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of goes along with Second Peter 3, where people will believe in uniformitarianism and they'll deny the flood, and that's fulfilling prophecy when everybody denies the worldwide flood. But so they have plate tectonics where the plates move slowly, about as fast as your fingernails grow. Okay. But then the catastrophic plate tectonics takes that model and speeds it up to put it in the Bible. So it's a secular model sped up. And and it's kind of like theistic evolution, where they take a secular model and they slap a cross on it and try and squeeze it into the Bible, and that's not what the Bible teaches. And so that's those are the models. And then the hydroplate theory, it was developed by Dr. Walt Brown back in like 1973. So this has been on the table for 50 years. If we would have
Wow.
been banging this drum for the last 50 years with all his accurate predictions, we'd have a lot of scientific clout. And so that bothers me that it's really we've shot ourselves in the foot by ignoring a theory that makes accurate predictions. Plus, the NASA discoveries are validating it. And so I'm doing what I can to give people all the information so they can make informed decisions. And it's not happening, in our schools, museums, media, even AI will give the consensus, not what's real. They'll just give the consensus. Even if the consensus was 2 + 2 = 5, they'll give that answer. And yeah, we've got that on Answers in Genesis. Canada came out with those conversations with Grok, which is really good. But going back to the hydroplate theory, he developed it, and basically he's I think he's that today's Isaac Newton. He was a West Point grad. He was an Army Ranger, paratrooper. Got his PhD from MIT in mechanical engineering. So he's really sharp. He ran the Benet military lab where there's dozens of PhDs working for him, plus 100 scientists. So he's really sharp. And if I understand it right, he was going through South Dakota way back when, and he heard on the radio that somebody claimed they found an ark on a mountain. And he thought, what a nutcase, because he's an evolutionist. But in South Dakota, there's not much to do when you're driving. So I think he to keep his mind busy, he just humored him. If there was an ark on the mountain, that would mean that the whole world was flooded with water, was underwater at one time. That would mean a whole bunch of plants and animals got buried in mud, and they would turn into fossils. And then he thought, well, if fossils are a sign of a flood, where's the evidence for evolution? And then he began to ask his colleagues, and where's the evidence for evolution? And nobody had any. And then he saw in the Bible how there's biblical verses about water inside of the earth. And so he thought, well, if there's water in the earth, what would that happen? What would happen there? And most theories, they take what we know, and that's the effect, and they try and figure out what caused it, and the cause is unknown. This is different. He sets up the cause with only one assumption, and that assumption is half of the ocean was inside the earth at one time. That was it. And then he lets the laws of physics go at it, and it shows us perfectly what we have. So just think of the earth as a big apple with the skin of the apple 60 miles thick, made of granite. And that underneath that granite, there's a layer of water about a mile thick. And that's just the one assumption. Throw the laws of physics at it. The moon tugs on the earth with high tide and low tide, so it's going to tug on the crust. And back then, the crust wasn't broken into plates like it is today. It was just the crust. So it stretched and compressed, stretch and compress, stretch and compress, and that generated heat. So the water got hotter and hotter and hotter, and it wants to boil, but there's no room to expand. And then at 705 degrees and 3,200 pounds per square inch, it becomes supercritical, where it's not really water and it's not really steam, but whatever it is, it dissolves things like crazy. So now it's dissolving the granite above and the basalt below, and it's mixing it all together and making things like limestone and salts and silicas and quartz. And these cementing agents, how did that sand turn into sandstone? It had to be melted. It had to be mixed with cementing agents. And this is where those chemicals got together. And when limestone forms, it releases carbon dioxide. And there's 60,000 times more limestone than carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So Walt Brown, he asked Bob Dietz when they were both teaching at Arizona State, and he asked him, well, where'd all this limestone come from? And Bob says, beats the blank out of me. And so this can explain it. A good source for diving deep is Brian Nickel. He's got a real good YouTube channel where he talks about the origin of limestone, the origin of comets, the origin of the 90 East Ridge, the origin of radioactivity, and he gives a good overview of the hydroplate theory. And that's a good place to get a lot of information. Very well, very, very well done. Okay, so this water's getting hotter and hotter, and it's dissolving more, and the crust is getting weaker and weaker, and then finally the crust cracks. And Walt Brown says it's under 372,000 pounds per square inch. Can you imagine going from 372,000 psi to atmospheric pressure of 14.7? It's just going to explode out of there. Just, I mean, if this water bottle had that much pressure in it and it got released, it'd probably blow up my house. And so, it cracked the crust in two directions. That crust went around the earth in two directions and then came together like a seam on a baseball. And that's how it could rain for 40 days and 40 nights. The water's erupting out of the earth and it's raining for 40 days and 40 nights. And with catastrophic plate tectonics, they say lava comes, and and what is the fountains of the great deep? With the, they think it's lava, and now they're trying to change it into supercritical waters that are getting closer. So anyhow, and people say, well, if that happened on the Earth, wouldn't it leave a mark? And the answer is, yeah, it did. It left the mid-oceanic ridge. That's a 46,000-mile mountain range that goes around the bottom of every ocean, and it's made by stretching it in two directions. They're made of tension cracks, not compression cracks. And so they're straight. Rock is really strong when you push it together, and then you get like a marble cake compression cracks. But when you try and pull rock apart, it breaks at the weakest point, and then it's a straight line. And if you zoom in on that mid-oceanic ridge, they got vertical lines going north and south and east and west, vertically and horizontally. So it's made by stretching it in two directions. It's like, how do you make a mountain range all over the world by stretching it? Well, that's the hydroplate explains that. So how did that happen? That's the mark. But how did it get there? So you got the crust that's cracked, and now you got 260-mile cliffs with water erupting out of there, a tremendous force. That's why that's where we get the sediment for the sedimentary rock, because the granite is eroding on the bottom and on the sides, whereas the mantle or the basalt is being eroded on top of it. And what is it? If you get sedimentary rock that doesn't have carbon in it, like limestone, then it's going to be 65 parts granite and 35 parts basalt. And that's kind of why, because granite was getting eroded on both sides, two sides instead of one side. Okay, so then these two cliffs are getting farther and farther and farther apart, and pretty soon there's nothing to push down on the mantle. And keep in mind, a cliff can only be 5 miles high on Earth before it crushes the rock below. It can't support it. And these are 60 miles high. So it's just crumbling into this hypersonic water that's erupting out of there. And then the cliffs are eroding farther and farther apart. And then eventually there's nothing pushing down on the mantle, and the mantle bulges. And so then the continents, which are on supercritical water, they start sliding. It's kind of like air hockey, And this supercritical water is, I've seen 50 in the book. It says 50 times more slipperier than water. And so just, if you have water on a air hockey table and you hit it, it's not going to go too well. But you turn the air on, it's going to go all over the place. And so that's what's happening with the plates. They are lubricated on this supercritical water, and they start sliding because the mid-oceanic ridge bulged. So North America and South America, they start sliding to the west, and Africa and Europe start sliding to the east, and they keep going until they meet resistance, and then they buckle up and form mountains. And that's why the major mountain ranges are parallel to the mid-oceanic ridge. The Andes and the Rockies, they're parallel to the mid-Atlantic ridge. And then the Rockies is twice as wide because it looks like it slid over the mid-oceanic ridge. And so then you got the mountains that formed up, they buckled and Welt Browns. So that's, the first part is the rupture phase. And that's when the water erupts. And now this is the continental drift phase when they're sliding. And he says that's about a day. He figures that's about day 150 of the flood, of Noah's flood. And then the mountains rise up, and he thinks that happened in about an hour. It just buckled up like crazy. So now you have the recovery phase where we're trying to get back to equilibrium. And you got the mountains, which are a big mass on a small base. They sink in. Well, if something sinks in, something has to rise up, and that would be the plateaus. They have a hard time explaining how plateaus seem to have grown upward and downward at the same time. And so then the plateaus rise up, and then similarly, and we're just doing the cliff notes here, but similarly, as the mountains rise up, the mountains sink down, the plateaus rise up. Similarly, the mid-oceanic ridge rises up. Something has to sink in, and what sinks in is the Pacific Ocean. That's the Ring of Fire. That's why the Pacific Ocean has the trenches, Mariana Trench, which is a mile deeper than Mount Everest is high. How did that get there? And it's also got all these 40,000 table mounts and sea mounts, all this volcanic activity there. And that's because it melted. Yeah, so then the water, which was covering the earth during Noah's flood, rushed off to fill in the Pacific Ocean. And that's how we get submarine canyons. And some of these are like 3 miles deep. You can't cut a canyon 3 miles deep
Yeah.
through sedimentary rock or even crystalline rock. And so that showed us that the continents were higher. The water gushed off and cut those canyons. And then the continents have sunk in and the oceans have risen up and buried those canyons in water. And then, yeah, we'll just fast forward for sake of time. And then some of this, we need to mention this frozen mammoth that's standing up. That's an anomaly. How do you freeze something standing up? And it's in the St. Petersburg Museum, and it's got a crushed femur, all of that stuff. But basically, this theory would try to explain it as some of that stuff was shooting up with such tremendous force that it escaped our atmosphere. And so now you got water, which is ice, and carbon dioxide, which would be dry ice, and all those minerals, that would be mud, and came down, got super cold in outer space. Gravity grabs a hold of it and buries the mammoths in super cold mud, or hail. Gets buried in muddy hail. They get buried to the bottom of the and then I'm not sure how deep they were buried, but then the flood came and and went over them, but it didn't thaw out. Okay, and then fast forward another bit. Some of that stuff was going up with such tremendous force that not only did it break through our atmosphere, it busted out of Earth's gravitational pull. And so now you got dirty snowballs flying around the solar system, such as comets and asteroids. And the NASA discoveries are validating that material came from Earth. They found amino acids and all that stuff, and all this stuff. And it's an incredible theory that is worthy of study, and it's being kicked to the curb by blind chancers and creationists alike. And I'm trying to bring it into the mainstream, because when this theory, the hydroplate theory, gets into the mainstream, it destroys the Big Bang. The Big Bang predictions cannot work, or they've been wrong this whole time. Their laws of physics cannot get asteroids to have a moon, and a lot of other things that they just cannot, contact binaries. They can't explain it. But Kevin Lee, he had orbital physics, and he's a pastor now in Port Orchard, Washington. He had orbital physics decades ago, because he was trying to, they wanted him, he was working at the Navy nuclear shipyard, and they wanted him to be an engineer. And he didn't have the degree, so he was studying to pass the test. And so we had orbital physics. So when NASA comes out with what they discover, he knows that it can't happen by blind chance. He knows that the Big Bang is on just real thin ice, and we're chipping around trying to make it fall through the ice and get that blind chance theory. And then it validates the Bible, and I think that's why there's so much resistance to it. The thing that puzzles me is why creationists are resisting it. That's a tough one, because Thomas Chamberlain, he's a really smart guy over 100 years ago, president of Chicago or whatever, right, university. But he said there should always be two multiple working hypotheses. So then people can sharpen their analytical skills. They can compare and contrast. But what's happening today, he says, otherwise people just memorize and conform. And that's what's happening in our government schools. They only teach them a blind chance perspective, so people just memorize and conform. But even at our Christian organizations, they just teach the catastrophic plate tectonic model. They don't give another model for people to think about. And I think if we want to educate people, we should give them all the information so they can make informed decisions. And we're trying to get the CPT guys to, step up to a roundtable discussion, and so we can critique each model, the strengths and weaknesses of each model. But they are very, very, very reluctant to do it. And as of yet, they haven't done it yet. But we keep inviting them. The hydroplate theory is going to be the ninth edition is coming to print this September, rumor has it. And I haven't believed these rumors for 5 years. It's always later this year. But supposedly it's going to happen this time. So we're hopefully putting together a hydroplate conference in November, 6, 7, and 8 possibly, because we had a hydroplate conference in 2023 where
Right.
we even had a professor from the U.S. Air Force Academy speak about trans-Neptune objects. And so this theory has everything it needs. I mean, we have all the wind at our sails right now. There's more evidence against the Big Bang and evolution than ever before. This information is more easily accessible than ever before with the internet. And now the information is broken into bite-sized pieces, like never before so people can understand it. Plus, we have a theory that's making accurate predictions, and we've got NASA discoveries that are validating it, and we have a professor at the U.S. Air Force Academy that is on board with this. So I think this is the time to bring it into the mainstream and just have a discussion. That's all I want. If it's wrong, it's wrong, but let's analyze it. There might be details of it that are wrong, but I think with the NASA discoveries and the accurate predictions, I think the framework is right. But it's been, again, kicked to the curb for 50 years, and that's a crying shame. That's a dark day in science. We need to bring it into the open so people can talk about it, and then just follow the science wherever it goes. So in a nutshell, hopefully that was understandable. We go into more
Yeah.
detail on my YouTube channel, but yeah, it was a blessing to get this information out there, Kurt.
Oh, amen. Yeah, and that's you bring up a really good point there by saying like analyzing the information.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm the type of person I need to hear and understand kind of both sides to an argument.
Yep.
If
Yep.
I don't do that, but yet I'm so certain about one and I don't even know anything about the other, like really, am I that well informed? Am I really
Right.
making an informed decision? Well, no, I'm
Right.
not. And this goes from anything from science, but also to like theological
Right.
debates and doctrine and this and that, right? Like you
Right.
should be informed of what everybody says,
Yeah.
um, what information is out there, and then you form your own conclusion. Sometimes you might find something in the middle.
Right.
All models are wrong, but some of them are
Some
useful.
are helpful. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I think, I had a debate with an evolutionist a couple of Saturdays ago. And my opening statement was defining science from our textbook. It's observable and testable. Okay. And if it's not observable or testable, it's not science.
Yeah.
And then we separated facts from the conclusions. A fact is a verifiable piece of information, where a conclusion is a judgment based upon the fact. And so, like, they'll say Grand Canyon, that's a fact. Then it says formed over 6 million years. Well, that's an interpretation. So we have to do that. And then we also, Rod Stadler, he's got a really good book called The Scientific Approach to Evolution or something like that.
Yep.
He spoke at the Twin Cities Creation Science Association meeting. And you can see his talk on YouTube. It's TCCSA. And it's the stairway, I forget what it's called. Oh, yeah. Evolution and Creation, Friends, Enemies, or Frenemies. But he talks about evidence. Is it high confidence evidence or low confidence evidence?
Yep.
High confidence evidence is, a double blind safety. It's observable, it's testable, it gets rid of bias. And then the low confidence, I would submit, isn't even science. You can't test it, you can't observe it. And so that's what we talked. I laid that ground that framework for the debate. And so it's like, yeah, we both have the same facts. And
Hmm.
you're trying to you're trying to get to your conclusion is to be part of the fact, but it's not. And so I think science should just teach what's observable and testable. And then, if a theory is making accurate predictions, especially if it has biblical verses that support it, I think that we should be looking at it as far as Christians go. And I was going to go to in July, they had the Creation Science Convention in
Hmm.
St. Louis. I was going to go there. And somebody told me, hey, don't waste your time. Their minds are made up. Go to the homeschoolers. And so that's what I did. I spoke in Minnesota and I spoke in Iowa. I talked to the homeschoolers and I had a booth there and I lost my voice. And on my booth, I had the question, will the Big Bang or will the hydroplate theory destroy the Big Bang? And
Hmm.
so then people came up, what's the hydroplate theory? What's the hydroplate theory? And I almost lost my voice explaining it to them. But we just plant the seeds and the truth will prevail eventually. And there's that saying, and I'm seeing it, science sometimes advances one funeral at a time. With like the Scablands, J. Harlan Brents, he said, hey, this is from a flood, a glacial flood. But back then, their only paradigm they could use was uniformitarianism. So they
Yeah.
couldn't allow a catastrophe. And then over time, those people that were indoctrinated to think that way died off. And then he finally got his award when he was 90. And so we're seeing that, people are indoctrinated to think of plate tectonics and they won't look at another
Hmm.
view. And so eventually the hydroplate will replace it if we get it into the next generation.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to do right now is get this into the next generation so that it doesn't die on the vine because it's got the proper perspective of the past. And that's a biblical perspective, and it makes accurate predictions. That's the currency of science, and it's been astoundingly accurate. And yet, for whatever reason, it's been kicked to the curb, and I'm trying to get it into the mainstream. But it's a little more
Yeah.
difficult than you would think, because you would think science, hey, let's take a look at these theories. They don't invite hydroplate people to come to their conferences. So we had to have our own 2 years ago. And but eventually, it's starting to gain traction. I've heard PhDs mention it positively. And so, and then the other thing we need to get addressed is, there's creationists out there that are somewhat associated with these big organizations, and they're afraid to talk about it. They're afraid that it could wreck their relationship with these big organizations who are selling
Mhm.
their books. And so that's not science. We need to get all the information. People should be able to speak freely without any fear of consequences of, whatever, breaking their relationship with the big organization. And so that's probably the first domino that has to fall, so people can speak freely, and also it gives the people the ability to think. Because when people can't speak freely, that it violates the speaker, but it also violates the rights of the hearers. People
Mhm.
need to hear what they have to say, and we sure saw that during COVID. And so people have to have the ability to speak without any fear of any repercussion. That's the first domino that I found. I thought the first domino was we need to have a creation organization at least put it up in their museum so people can think. They don't have to endorse it, but just put it up. Let people
Yep.
think. That's the first domino. And then the second domino is have somebody endorse it. But what I've come to realize is the very first domino is people need to have the freedom to think and to speak. And
Yep.
tragically, it's not there. It's getting better. The censorship, the dam of censorship is breaking. And thank God for leaders that allow, the hydroplate to be. There's one organization, they even brought it in. They invited hydroplate guys to come in and talk to their scientists, because the leader wanted his scientists to know what theories are out there. And he said,
Wow.
I want to hear what the hydroplate theory people have to say. I don't want to hear what people have to say about the hydroplate people. And so the leadership is changing, and it is gaining traction. And now I think the big thing is when this ninth edition finally gets to print. It's been on the back, and they've been trying to print it since 2019. And so, but hopefully this fall it gets out there and we get the hydroplate conference and people have it in their hands, and then people start thinking, because when we can make accurate predictions, we'll have so much clout in the evolutionist community if we can get this in the mainstream. And then all they can do is censorship. Then that's about the only card they have. But we just need a grassroots people understanding what happened during Noah's flood and getting informed and informing other people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and I like that you mentioned thinking. Like
Yeah.
the channel I have here is how to think is what I named it. And
Right.
that is a big principle of it is having the information, seeking things out for yourself, right? And if you're
Right.
so convinced of your idea,
Yeah.
well, and it's so true, then
Yeah.
won't it prove itself to be true? So why are you worried about it? Why are you trying to suppress other ideas? If your idea is superior or your idea is true, then that's going to come out every single
Right.
time. It's going to win every single time if you just honestly seek it out.
Right.
So,
And it's a tragedy because I was at a creation. I heard a creationist speak, and I afterwards it was Q&A, and I asked him, what what he thought of the hydroplate, and he said it doesn't work. And I said, well, why not? And he said, well, it breaks laws of physics. And I said, well, which laws of physics? And he said, I'm not sure, but the geologists I know don't go along with the hydroplate. That's real similar to a creationist talking to an evolutionist. The
yeah,
evolutionists, the biologists I know don't go along with it.
yeah,
And so what I found out, they're relying on the creation geologists to form their opinion. And we've been in an email exchange with creation geologists, and the questions they ask show that they have an embarrassing lack of understanding of the hydroplate, and yet they are still, people are relying on their advice. And it's interesting the mental gymnastics that
mhm,
are going on. And if you want to see the emails that have been flying back and forth, I did a presentation on this called Jousting Flood Models. It's on my YouTube channel, but it's not real prominent. You're going to have to search jousting,
Yeah.
And one of the experts, CPT experts, he accused us of being part of a satanic assault. And it's
Wow.
like, yeah, it's like, well, that's for one thing, that's not science. And for another thing, well, and my response was, well, if that's true, you should really step up to the microphone and end this assault once and for all. And he still runs from the microphone. So that's where we are in science right now. And it's not a good look for creationists or for scientists
No.
to ignore a theory that's making accurate predictions and being validated by NASA discoveries. And that's really not a good look. And so I'm not sure how we're going to get it in the mainstream, but man, I'm swinging for the fence wherever I can. And hopefully this hydroplate conference comes about in November, and hopefully the book is available, because when people have it in their hands, oh my goodness, it is so much fun to read. Just
Oh
going
yeah.
from footnote to footnote, it's so well sourced, and it's got all these decision trees at the end of every chapter, like Grand Canyon. It explains it perfectly. And then at the end, it's got, on top of the table, it's got 9 theories trying to explain Grand Canyon. And then on the side, you've got all these features of the Grand Canyon, probably 24 of them. And then it's red, green, and yellow. Does it do it really well? That's green. Does it kind of do it? That's yellow. And does it not do it at all? That's red. And
Wow.
then you go through, and the hydroplate theory is green all the way down, and everything else is red and yellow with maybe a couple of greens. And they does the same thing with the origin of comets, the origin of limestone, the origin of the universe, the origin of radioactivity. And so it's an all-encompassing theory that I think is really good at giving people all the information. And
Wow.
they're all sourced, and it's just so well done. Just a brilliantly put together book. And I encourage people, hopefully that's going to be the Christmas gifts this year. They're going to be available.
Oh, there
And
we go.
start donating them to your libraries, and then encouraging the creation organizations to give it a view.
Yeah.
Why are we censoring it? Why are we, especially when it's making accurate predictions? It'd be interesting to see what they say.
No, you keep mentioning these scientific studies and predictions.
Yeah.
Um, whoa, can you give an example of a few of those?
Yeah, like he accurately predicted that yeah, I could probably even show you some of them. But just
Yeah.
off of the top of the head, he accurately predicted that comets or asteroids would be floating rock piles. He accurately predicted that that they'd have rounded boulders in them. It's like, well, how are you going to get rounded boulders in an asteroid? When they break apart in space, they're going to be jagged, but these
Uh-huh.
are rounded. The only way you get rounded is if they're going through um, um, going through fast flow of water. And yeah, I'll just read them here for you too. The confirmed ones, you probably can't see it though. He made a prediction: beneath major mountains are large volumes of pooled salt water, and that was confirmed in 2001. And then he also predicted that crystalline rock under Gibraltar, the Bosporus, and the Dardanelles, and the Golden Gate Bridge will be formed to be eroded into a V-shaped notches. So I suppose that's where the granite uh, cracked, just like the inner gorge of Grand Canyon. Okay, and this was published in 95, and it was confirmed in 99 or 98 and 2009 and in 2018. And then he also predicted let's see here, soil and erosion channels on Mars will contain trace of Earth-like soluble compounds such as salt from Earth's pre-flood subterranean chambers. And that was confirmed in 2004. He made the prediction in 2001 and was confirmed in 2004. And then some comets, asteroids, and meteoroids will be found to be made of crystalline material forged in extreme heat, like cubonite. That thing that has to be formed in scalding hot water. And it was made in the 7th edition in 2001, and it was confirmed with Wild 2, the Stardust mission in 2004, and Comet Tempel 1 in 2005. And then he said some large near parabolic comets, as they fall towards the center of the solar system for the first time, will have moons. And that was confirmed in 1997 and 1998 with the comet Hale-Bopp. And then asteroids, like I mentioned before, would be our rock piles, often with internal ice acting as weak glue. Large rocks that begin the capture process are near the center of the asteroids and comets. And that was confirmed, let's see, in 2024. And also that with the DART mission, they tried to redirect an asteroid, and so they hit it with something, and it was a lot. It wasn't a rock, and that was actually predicted by Kevin Lee. He emailed the NASA scientist and said, if you try to redirect an asteroid, it'll work if it's a solid rock, but it'll fail if it's a bunch of loosely held boulders. And it was a bunch of loosely held boulders. So now there was like 30 some boulders coming at us, but supposedly they're going to miss. And he also he talked face to face with that NASA scientist with the Stardust mission when they were getting stuff back from the comet. And that was Dr. Brownlee out of Washington. And he said, you're going to find stuff from the Earth in that comet. And he was predicting, no, we're going to find stuff from the outer solar system, like the Oort cloud. And he was shocked to find stuff from the inner solar system. So we're making accurate predictions. Okay, moving on to prediction 40. Most of the rocks, pebble size and larger, comprising asteroid and comets, will be found to be rounded to some degree. And that was confirmed. And then Planet X will not be found in the next 5 years by January 2021 because it does not exist. And that was confirmed. They hadn't found it yet. Bones or other organic remains that contain enough carbon are believed to be older than 100,000 years will be shown to be relatively young in blind radiometric tests. And that was confirmed in 2001. That's the thing. They don't do blind tests when they carbon date something. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And then, beneath major mountain ranges are large volumes of pooled salt water. And they found in 1980 supercritical salt water appeared to be below the Tibetan Plateau. That's what those black smokers are in the bottom of the ocean. That's supercritical water coming out of the ground.
Oh.
And this explains it. And so that's just some of the things you can see these. You can see these predictions. You can actually get a digital form of the hydroplate theory if you go into rsr.org, that stands for Real Science Radio, rsr.org
Oh, yeah.
slash HPT. And then there's a link that says 9th edition. You click that and you can download it and you can search predictions. And it's on page like 400 some, where you can see all the predictions, and the ones that are accurate are going to be in bold. And he's got probably 40 other predictions that are out there. My question for the plate tectonics guys and the catastrophic plate tectonic guys is, what predictions are you making right now? Do you have any current predictions?
Right.
And yeah, and so that's, the Walt Brown's made a whole bunch of them, and there was one that was false because of a mathematical error, but there's another one that's questionable with incoming comets, but that can be explained. So anyhow, yeah, those are some of the predictions, and it's a fun theory. It really is.
Yeah.
I've gotten comments. It's like, man, this is nothing excites me much more than nothing much more in life excites me more than the hydroplate theory. It's like having the answers to the test. And
Yeah.
whenever they discover something, there's an adage out there: all scientists work for Walt Brown. Yeah, supports the Walt Brown, the hydroplate theory, and even AI works for Walt Brown, but it's been reprogrammed, so now it's not as friendly. But
Sure. You get different
yeah,
things from AI.
yeah, that's another talk that I did on my YouTube channel. AI works for Walt Brown. You can see what it said to these questions, and then when I was going to do it, I got totally different answers. So then I got the screenshots from where I heard about it before.
And I suppose it covers the, great fountains of the deep breaking
Yeah,
open better than CPT. And sounds like CPT does it kind of start from Pangea as well? That concept, or
that would be my guess.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just the plates. They just took a secular model and they sped it up. And I think we should make a biblical model. And you
Yeah.
can go into Real Science Radio, rsr.org/HPT. You're going to get all the information on the hydroplate. And
Oh, okay.
you're going to see the biblical verses that support each theory. It's a table. It's got hydroplate, it's got canopy, and it's got catastrophic plate. And then it's got a list of verses, that support, and mainly it's all hydroplate.
Yeah.
The one thing that I do disagree with about the hydroplate, they say the firmament is the granite, and I'm not sure about that. So, but that's the one thing that but everything else, the science part. I even gave the book to a geology professor. This was years ago, and I said, "You guys don't have a theory for Grand Canyon that works." Because my brother-in-law, he was at St. Cloud State, and he had a geology class, and they're trying to figure out how Grand Canyon formed,
Mm.
and and they spent a week on it, looked at all these theories, none of them worked. And then on Friday, the professor said, there's one theory we haven't looked at. Anybody know what it is? And the kid raised his hand and said, no, it's flood. And the professor said, it got real quiet. And the professor said, you're right, but we can't talk about it.
Oh, of
And
course not.
yeah, yeah, it's not interesting. They don't have a theory that works, and yet they won't talk about one that could. And I don't think it formed right after the flood because you need the mud to solidify. Otherwise, all those steep walls would have just slumped in. So but anyhow, yeah, but I gave it to the professor. And that's one thing, the geology people, they can't answer Grand Canyon. So that opens the door. I gave her the eighth edition. She had it for almost or over 6 months. And then we talked. And she said that the theory works if the assumption is right. She just didn't believe the assumption. She didn't think there was water under the oceans back then. It's like,
Yeah.
well, why not? There's water under the oceans today,
Well,
you know?
don't you?
And
I think you
so,
find, yeah, there's underwater caves, right? There's even
oh yeah,
places you can go to where there is like a pocket of water underneath the crust still, I believe.
yeah, those black smokers, that's super critical. And
Yeah.
then this year, just last fall, I gave it to a geology professor and she was going to look at it, and I had a table at St. Cloud State, talking, and there's a couple of students just got very irrational on me and were yelling at me. And they said I should talk to that professor. And it's like, I gave her the book. And then just like that, she gave it back and said that it's wrong. She didn't even have it for 2 or 3 days. She just said she emailed me, said it's at the desk. We don't have to meet again. And so it's, and I kind of understand, like, there's this book by Jerry Bergman. He's got 3 volumes
Yeah.
of this. He's got Slaughter of the Dissidents, Silencing the Darwin Skeptics, Censoring the Darwin Skeptics. If you kick the sacred cow, you could lose your grant money, your job, your grad school. It's just a witch hunt that's going on right now. And that's hurting science a lot. And it kind of reminds me of the Emperor Has No Clothes.
Yes.
Everybody's pretending that this works. They don't want to appear stupid. We just need that kid to yell, hey, the Emperor has no, or evolution has no evidence. And I think that's happening right now. There's so much
Yeah.
evidence against the Big Bang. But even in that story, instead of the emperor being embarrassed and being, apologizing, it just went proudly as like nothing happened. And that's what evolutionists are doing right now.
Yeah.
There's so much evidence against the Big Bang as far as even what's happening inside of our cell. There's no way that got together by blind chance. There's no way.
Possible.
And yet, yep. But they have to keep on. And Francis Crick, said a quote something like, "You have to keep on reminding yourself in biology what you're looking at is not designed." It's like, well, why do you have to remind yourself? It's clearly designed. And so, yeah. And so that's it. It's a battle. I encourage people to get involved. It's the funnest one out there, I think. And because we got the winning hand. When the cards are laid down, we win. And it has eternal consequences. That's why there's
Yes.
such resistance. And that's why I'm so thankful that you do what you do, is getting information out there so people can think and come to an informed decision. And there should be nobody who objects to that. And when they do, that says they want censorship, and that basically says that they can't, their theory can't withstand scrutiny.
Hmm.
So they don't want it to be scrutinized.
Yep.
And we just have to have a grounds roots awakening, and so that science can advance. Because right now the big bangers are keeping, or the blind chancers are keeping science. They're making a lot of them, a lot of bad predictions, and a lot of things that hurt science, like junk DNA and vestigial organs and
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
like that. And then even, the catastrophic plate tectonics people, they're holding this down. And so this is, I think, the battering ram that destroys the Big Bang, and they're withholding it from people.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. If you can have a biblical theory, who is it? Mike Snavely. He does these presentations all over the world and gives tours, and he says this thing really helps people realize the Bible is true.
Yep.
And when people are censoring it or hiding it, it's like there's souls in the balance. You better make doggone sure you're right and start making some accurate predictions, or reconsider. And so, yeah, that's it's an exciting battle. And again, I encourage people to get involved.
Amen. Yeah, that reminds me. I believe it was Napoleon. He said, "People believe anything as long as it's not in the Bible."
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. And
So,
even people, I'm at the college a lot, and people scoff at the Bible. And it's like, hey, you're just fulfilling prophecy.
mhm.
The Bible said you'd be here. And yeah, there was one time a guy, a psychology major. He asked me, "What are you doing here?" And a lot of times I say, I just want to give people an opportunity to think. That's not happening in class. You need to see both sides. But this time I said, if you saw a blind person walking toward a cliff, would you warn them? He said, yeah, absolutely. And I said, well, that's what I see. I see people who are blinded for whatever reason. They can't see the creation or Jesus, and they're walking towards a cliff. And if they go over that cliff without Jesus, they spend an eternity in hell. And I don't want that. And God doesn't want that. That's why I'm here. And I said, they can choose that. Nobody can force them to go to heaven. They can choose to go off that cliff, but they're going to have to consciously walk by me and make a conscious decision to reject Jesus. And then they have no excuse. And so that's, what motivates me. I don't want people to go off that cliff
Yep.
without Jesus. And, with Ken Ham's book, Already Gone, it shows how, was it in that time, it was like 61% of the students or kids in Christian churches stop going to church once they leave home, and 90% in some denominations. But they surveyed them and they asked them, well, why? And the main answer was they doubted the Bible was true. So then they asked, well, when did you begin to have your doubts? And it was mainly junior high and high school. In Minnesota, junior high, 8th grade earth science, they have the Big Bang rammed down their throat. And then in 10th grade, they have biology and evolution rammed down their throat. And if they don't, and they got good questions. The problem is that they aren't getting good answers.
Yep.
I was at a community college one time, and a woman came up to me and said that it was either her daughter or her nurse was going through confirmation. And so he asked her, and so she asked the priest, about dinosaurs. And she didn't get a good answer.
Nope.
It's pretty much just believe it because I said so. And so she concluded either Adam and Eve are false or dinosaurs are false. And how can dinosaurs be false when there's fossils on every continent and footprints? And so I looked at the woman and I said, your daughter or niece or whoever is real close to kicking the Bible out of her life for the rest of her life. And I said, dinosaurs are true. Adam and Eve are true. The thing that's false is millions of years. And
Yep.
then I plugged her into my dino talk. And that's, I have these tables at different events. And one was a Christian event where I asked, when did dinosaurs live? It's all full of Christians going to hear these Christian speakers and Christian bands and all that stuff. Was it millions of years, thousands of years, or billions of years? And millions of years won, 81
Wow.
to 51. Yeah. So our churches are doing a very poor job of explaining how dinosaurs instead of a lot of people try and fit dinosaurs into the Bible. No, it's like you use the Bible to explain dinosaurs. They were made on day 6 with all the other land animals. 2 of every kind got on the ark. They were young ones, so they could fit in the
Yep.
door. And then all the rest of them died. A lot of them turned into fossils in the flood. And then they got off the ark, and people called them dragons,
Yep.
and carved them and castles and canyons and temples. And that's how dinosaurs. And then we killed them too. So yeah, that's the biblical interpretation of dinosaurs. The problem is, ask a kindergartner when dinosaurs lived millions of years ago.
Mm.
So they start them young. Dinosaurs are the gateway to evolution, and evolution is the gateway to atheism. And so that's where the battle is. And we got the answers. And we just need more soldiers. We need more people in the battle getting informed and informing others.
Yeah. How would because the description in Job, I believe it's
Oh,
in
yeah.
Job 40, a behemoth.
Yep. So 4015.
How
Beware.
could a document that old be describing a creature like that does not describe any creature, at least that's living today, that we know of and have studied, right?
Right.
Because what it could be possibly describing a crocodile, but crocodiles don't eat grass.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So so what else
Yeah.
could it be that has a tail like that? Well, obviously it's describing a dinosaur. So Job was told to behold one. He was told, look at it. So
Right.
how was he able to do that just from looking at bones? No, I don't think so.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that Answers in Genesis Canada, they have those conversations
Mhm.
with Grok. The first one, it proved the Bible. They had to have designed, but he had to always say, based on logic, mathematical probabilities, and observable science. And he got Grok to say, yeah, that could be the God of the Bible. And then he asks him, well, what would you call somebody who denies all this evidence? And Grok says, well, the trillions of organisms living all around the world that point to a designer to deny that you would be irrational or in denial. And so then he, why? And then he asks, if let's just forget about what we talked about, treat me as a brand new user. How did life begin? And it was abiogenesis and evolution. He goes, wait a minute. You said that you before you said that, and now you say this. Why is that? And then Grok says that, well, I'm programmed to give the consensus answer. And so then the next conversation with Grok, it's it's the flood. He got Grok to admit that there was a worldwide flood. And then again, he answered, first time user, nope, millions of years, all that stuff. He said, why is that? And then he asks him, if the consensus says that 2 plus 2 equals 5, what would you tell a new user? And Grok said, we would tell them 2 plus 2 equals 5. And so Grok is just doing the consensus. And I encourage people to watch those,
Wow.
and then the last one was dinosaurs and man. And then, at the end of that one, it's like, yeah, you're going to do the consensus, even though it breaks laws of logic. And that's what Grok will do.
Yep.
So AI is exposed itself to be a propaganda machine. It's going to tell what the consensus is,
Hmm.
and the consensus is wrong a lot. So Grok is going to be wrong a lot. So you always have to put, based on observational science, logic, and mathematical probabilities, you can get Grok to think. Otherwise, it's a propaganda machine. And I encourage, check out that website. It's on YouTube, Answers in Genesis Canada,
Yep.
Conversations with Grok. And I made a quick blurb of it and put it on my Solidify Your Faith channel. But yeah, it's and now they want to have AI in Barbie dolls. They just signed a contract with Mattel or whoever. So this Christmas, look for AI in dolls, and what a train wreck that's going to be.
Oh
Because
yeah.
Mark Dicey was asking Grok about transgender, boys and stuff and all that stuff. He says, is that unusual? Well, no, people have to make their own choices. And so it was, I don't know if it was a liberal one. And then he did the same thing with Grok, and they got the same answers. So again, this is censorship on steroids, and it's a propaganda machine. So
And
that's,
I mean, that's even gaslighting, right? I'm sure I'm sure at our age, 20 years ago, that type of concept of transit was nobody did that. That was, and I don't mean it meanly or whatever, but that was a weirdo, right? Or that
oh,
somebody
yeah.
probably had a mental health problem. It wasn't common, you
Right.
know. And
Our school system is promoting the mental health problem. They're
yes,
asking boys and kindergartners, "Oh, Billy, you might be a Susie." And you know what? And I was at the fair, so I get to talk to a lot of people that I don't normally talk to. And one guy said, and it was that a year ago, there was a guy, he pulled this kid out of school because a sixth grader out of school because they told him, you can change genders and we'll hide it from your parents. And
wow,
now this year, somebody said that happened in kindergarten. So our school system is promoting mental illness, and so that's very disturbing.
yeah,
And yeah, very disturbing. And so we need to have the truth.
yes,
And thank God we can still homeschool in private schools, so we can see what the Bible says. But in Germany, you can't homeschool. So we need to
wow,
stand up for our freedoms, and that's where the real battle is now. We need to use our freedoms to speak out, or we're going to lose them.
yes,
And what kind of world are we going to leave our kids if we don't stand up and stop it? Who's gonna? And so I encourage, hopefully, that motivates people to get informed and inform others. And yeah, yeah, that's one of the big issues is how do
yes,
you get people to get informed? Because and I was at the fair too, and I was asking, I'd ask, who paid the biggest criminal fine in U.S. history? And 95% of people don't have a clue. And here it's Pfizer, 2.3 billion for fraudulent marketing. It's like, how come we don't know that? Well, it's because they advertise so much. And so we need a good source of information that's not funded by Pfizer. And then I would promote the highwire.com. But we need good sources of information, and
yeah,
we're not getting it. And if we only get what our mainstream media is, which is funded by Pfizer or pharma, is telling us, we aren't going to have all the information to make informed decisions. And that's act in all areas of life.
yeah.
And I'm at the point, it's like, hey, I don't know what's going on. but it's probably not what you're telling me. So I look for alternative sources, eyewitness accounts, and primary sources. And so, there's the battle, and it's raging, and we need people to get involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, it took 37 years. I was thinking 37 years for me before even hearing any of these. I didn't know any of these arguments existed. I
Oh
didn't
yeah,
know they were out there. And the first time I heard them, I was at 30. I'm like, wow. But you have to look for it. But it
right,
shouldn't be where you have to look for it. That should
right,
just be, hey, and even if you want to say, hey, these are the conflicting theories. Here's what
right,
scientists say. Here's what other scientists say.
right,
Make an informed decision, but they like to suppress it, which to me is kind of a sign of guilt. Because if
right.
one side's trying to silence the other one, that usually hasn't been a good thing in history.
Well,
But
yeah, yeah. And then when they start calling you names, that's when they don't have anything logical to say.
yep.
So that's an ad hominem attack, and I usually take that as a victory.
Hmm.
You can't argue against the evidence. So now
Yep.
you focus on the person. And yeah, and they aren't teaching these skills in school, and I think that's by design. There's a book out there called Dumbing Us Down by the teacher of the year in New York, and she just rips that school system
Oh,
apart.
wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty eye-opening. And what they want is free market ideas. It's like instead of certifying people to teach, let anybody teach who wants it, and then let the best results go where people go where the best results are.
Yep.
And because right now they get their degree and it doesn't matter what the results are. And so we need a free market flow of ideas, and it's certainly not happening in the science class.
No.
And what's bothersome to me is I went through our curriculum last year. They gave me we have online textbooks, and they gave me the password, and so I was able to go through them, and I pointed out some errors in the curriculum based on Nature and NASA and PubMed and the Smithsonian. What they were in the textbook would violated what the major scientists were saying. And then she said, we're just teaching the state standards. And I said, well, what standard says we're 1.6% different from chimpanzees? And she didn't respond, but the superintendent emailed me saying that they contacted a law firm in their response. Instead of
Wow.
contacting the publisher to clean up these textbooks, they contacted a law firm. And so then I went to the school board and asked them if they'd do something about it. And I went back 6 times, and it's like, you're teaching kids that life can begin in water. Well, here's a PhD scientist, Jonathan Sarfati, who says it can't. And I had a 1 minute clip that I played of him explaining how water breaks apart molecules faster than they get put together. And so I said, can you show me a scientific paper that validates what's in your textbooks? And they couldn't. And it's like, I went back, can anybody in the school district do this? And these comments are on my YouTube channel. I got a playlist just for the school board. And so hopefully people realize that they're paying for errors, not only for a blind chance perspective to be taught as dogma. I mean, that makes me ticks me off. But what really ticks me off is when they use false information to prop up that blind chance perspective. And
Hmm.
so hopefully if there's somebody out there who wants to run for school board, who wants that spot, it can just say, hey, I want accurate textbooks, vote for me. Because in my school district, only 1 in 4 students can do math or science at the state level, and only 1 in 3 can read at the state level, the
Wow.
standard. But guess who gets the superintendent of the year? We did. So that shows that our Department of Education does not value education. What they value, I have no idea, maybe social programming. But parents need to, and taxpayers need to be informed and maybe even wake up. People say, well, I went to government schools, public schools when I was a kid. Yeah, well, they're different.
Yep.
Things have changed. Things are night and day different. And there's even my uncle, he was 85, sitting around the campfire. He says, I'm glad I'm old. I asked him, why would you say that? And he said, I wouldn't want to grow up in this world. And he's got some validity. I mean, those poor
Yeah.
kids are getting lied every way, every which way from Sunday. They need somebody there with the truth. And that's where we need to get involved and get involved with a passion.
Yeah. It's very important, especially how much it's targeting the youth, you know.
Right.
Um, and anybody out there, if you're not familiar with it, I'd look into the I believe it's Prussian system of education,
Oh,
which is what our entire education board was based off of.
really?
Essentially, it is not training people to be free thinkers or to be creative. It is teaching them how to be obedient. So it's
Yes.
producing employees, not
Yes.
employers, right? And
Yeah.
that's the whole design behind that system.
Yes.
And we adopted it in the Board of Education back in like 20s or 30s or something with Rockefeller.
Yeah.
So interesting stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Alex Newman, he's got some good talks on that. And he talked about why kids can't read. And it's because they're not being taught phonics. And they knew that was a train wreck way back with whoever it was, Horace Mann or whoever. They tried it in New England and it was failed. And then it
Mhm.
was a Dewey who dusted it off a few decades later and got that pushed into, then the Columbia University. That's the most powerful teachers college in the world. It's not even a close second, and that's
Mhm.
what they're still teaching is they aren't teaching phonics, they're teaching that sight sound thing.
Mhm.
And so apparently they don't want them to read, and I think somebody's suing the college. It's like, this doesn't work, why are you still pushing it? And you're right, they don't want free thinkers, they want government slaves basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, and and they don't want us to know what our freedoms are. That's the other thing I did at the fair too. It's like, hey, what's in the First Amendment? You go to the Marines or the Army, do your chin ups, get your prize. You take an oath to defend the Constitution, right? And they say, yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, well, did they tell you what's in the Constitution? And they said, no. And I said, well, can you tell me what's in the First Amendment? And I yet to have anybody who's taken an oath, that includes policemen, elected officials, everybody, who can tell me what's in the First Amendment. So if we don't know what our freedoms are, it's a lot easier for a tyrant to take them away. And
Yes.
so I'm trying to get that into the mainstream also. And in that dumbing us down book, that teacher of the year said, you know what, genius is common. It's more common than you expect, than you think. It's just the school system that we force our kids into, they don't allow that genius to flourish. They don't allow kids to think. They're always memorizing this and memorizing that. And it makes, she said, or he said, the first thing I teach is confusion. All these different subjects and they don't really link together and you don't have any, why do you learn this? Confusion. And then class, you break them into class. There's always the lower class
Hmm.
and conformity and the bells, don't do anything that matters. The bell's going to break it up anyway. And so they said it's like a 12-year prison sentence. And by the time they get out, their desire, their creativity, their curiosity is gone.
Yeah.
They don't want to pick up another book. And so certainly don't want to have a business. They don't know how to do a business or taxes or investments or savings. They learn everything they shouldn't know and then nothing of what they should know, apparently. I
Hmm.
mean, just look at society. And so, yeah, there's a battle there also.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Well, I appreciate you, Brian, being on. This was a lot of fun. I think a lot of great information. Is there anything that else that you wanted to go over or touch on, or how are you feeling?
I think we kicked a lot of sacred cows today. I would just encourage people to get informed and inform others, and
Yeah.
maybe check out my opening statement to in the debate, so we can get that in. The what science is, it's observable and testable, and then in my closing statement at the end of that debate, I give a lot of resources. So again, we have everything we need. There's again to repeat it. There's more evidence against evolution than ever before. There's this information is more easily accessible, and then I have a list of all these cool websites where you can get good information. I really like Long Story Short. It's a cartoon that shows what's happening inside your cell. Just can't happen by
Mm.
chance. And then it's even sourced. It even has the papers there that if you need that. And so I was looking up a lot of them, and it's broken into bite-sized pieces. And again, we got the theory that's making accurate predictions, and NASA discoveries are validating it, and yet it's being kicked to the curb. We have to get involved. And we have the Air Force Academy professor too. So we have everything we need. We just don't have enough people. So I strongly recommend that people get involved. This is how we can destroy the Big Bang. And then also have what was it? A radical dose of skepticism is the
Yes.
most rational position to have today,
Yep.
because we are getting lied to and gaslit all over the place, from our politicians to our media to our government schools. We need free thinkers. And I don't meet them on campus.
No.
It's like they know what to think, they don't know how to think. And then if I do meet someone who knows how to
To lose you. Oh, cut out there for a second. Or you're still frozen.